Um, Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a really massive swing. I want you to do something for me right now, wherever you are. Look up. Look at the ceiling.
Right.
Look at the corners of the room you're sitting in. Look at the floor.
What you're seeing is a box.
It's a box. It's straight lines. It's 90-degree angles, flat surfaces. We live in boxes. We work in boxes. We drive in boxes. And honestly, we never really question it.
No, we just think, well, that's just architecture. That's just how things are built in the modern world.
Right, exactly.
Mm.
But we are asking a question today that sounds, frankly, a little unhinged at first glance. What if these boxes are actually killing us?
Or, to be a bit more specific based on our sources, what if the geometry of our modern world is actively designing us against the laws of nature?
Yeah. And we aren't talking about feng shui here in the way people usually mean it, right? Like, oh, move the couch to the left to get better vibes in the living room.
No, not at all. We are talking about physics, hard, measurable physics.
We are talking about buildings as machines.
Yes. This is the concept of forbidden physics applied to architecture. When you look at the stack of research we have today, it is wild. We are diving into everything from lost biblical engineering to modern plasma physics.
It's a huge stack.
It is. And it starts to look less like a philosophical question about aesthetics, and more like a massive civilization-wide blueprint error.
A blueprint error that might actually explain why you feel tired all the time, why we feel so disconnected, and why our energy systems are just so horribly inefficient.
Exactly. We are talking about technology that utilizes implosion, ether harvesting, and consciousness amplification. And the crazy claim from these sources is that we used to know how to do this.
We used to build cathedrals and temples that were essentially power plants.
Right. And now we just build static, dead containers.
So the mission today for this deep dive is to decode this lost science. We are going to look at organic architecture, not as a design style, but as a circuit board.
And we are going to explore how ancient blueprints, specifically the biblical Molten Sea described in the Book of Kings, were actually schematics for ether-to-matter converters.
Which is just a mind-bending concept.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at the math behind it, too, because the numbers are staggering.
They really are. We're going to talk about biogeometry and how specific shapes can actually balance energy fields.
And we'll get into how acoustic resonance, literally just sound, might be the key to things like exotic vacuum objects.
We have a really heavy stack of sources today. We are analyzing the plasmoid unification model by Malcolm Bendall. We've got the extensive research on biogeometry by Dr. Ibrahim Karim.
We even have actual patent notes on implosive turbines.
Right, and some truly wild studies on EVOs, those exotic vacuum objects.
It is a lot to unpack, but we have to start with the basics. If we are saying our buildings are wrong, we have to understand what right actually looks like.
Right.
The sources describe this war of forces in the universe. What exactly is this war?
Well, it's not a war in the sense of, good versus evil necessarily. It's more a war of direction.
Okay.
To understand this, we have to look at the work of Malcolm Bendall and the principles of biogeometry. They both identify two opposing forces that govern every single thing in the universe.
Okay.
On one side, you have the force we are most familiar with in our modern industrial world, the male explosive centrifugal force.
Okay, centrifugal. I remember this from high school physics. That's the force that pushes things out, right?
Exactly.
Like when you spin a bucket of water around on a rope and the water wants to fly away from your hand.
Yes, that's it perfectly. It's the force of moving out. It's associated with expansion, with heat, radiation, and combustion.
So an explosion.
Right, think about an explosion. It starts at a central point and blasts everything outward, basically destroying the structure in the process.
And this is how our engines work.
It is exactly how our entire civilization works. Look at the internal combustion engine in your car. What are you actually doing?
I'm blowing up gas.
Right. You are taking a complex molecule, gasoline, and you are exploding it. You are breaking it down, creating heat, creating pressure to push a piston.
Yeah.
It's a process of decay. You are taking order and turning it into chaos just to get a little bit of kinetic energy.
Entropy.
High entropy. It's incredibly inefficient. It's super hot, and it's destructive. And the sources argue that this specific force is geometrically represented by the straight line.
Wait, the straight line, how does a line equal an explosion?
Think about it visually. When something explodes, the shrapnel travels in a straight line away from the center.
Oh, okay.
The radial vector moving away from the center is the path of leaving. It's the path of death, essentially, in this model.
So when I look at a modern skyscraper, and I see those massive steel beams shooting straight up into the sky or the perfect square grid of the city streets.
You are looking at the geometry of explosion. You are looking at a system fundamentally designed to dissipate energy, to scatter it.
Wow.
But there is another force, the opposing force, the female implosive centripetal force. Centripetal, meaning it's moving in.
Moving towards the center. Yes.
Yeah.
This is the force of life. It's
Yeah.
the force of ordering, of cooling, of suction. It generates what the sources call negative entropy or negentropy.
Negentropy, that sounds like a completely made-up sci-fi word.
I know, it does, but it's a real concept. Instead of things falling apart and decaying, this force pulls things together into higher orders of complexity.
Give me an example in nature.
It's the force that allows a tiny seed to grab random chemicals and water from the dirt and organize them into a massive complex tree.
Right.
It's the force that allows a whole galaxy to hold itself together in a spiral.
So nature builds using implosion.
Almost exclusively. Look at a seashell. Look at a tornado. Even look at the way water drains out of your bathtub.
It spirals.
It doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals. It creates a vortex. It constantly moves toward the center.
So the argument here is that organic architecture, meaning the way nature naturally builds things, is designed to harness this implosive force. That is the core thesis of all these documents. Organic architecture actively eliminates straight lines to harness centripetal implosion. It creates what Bendall calls a plasmoid torus model.
Okay, let's unpack plasmoid torus, because I see this donut shape popping up everywhere in these notes. It feels like the holy grail of this entire theory.
The torus is absolutely fundamental. Visualizing it is key here. Imagine a donut. Or actually, better yet, imagine a smoke ring.
Okay, I've got the smoke ring.
Watch how the smoke is rolling around itself. It's constantly turning inside out, right?
Yeah.
Energy flows up through the center hole, wraps around the outside, and goes back in the bottom. It's a completely self-sustaining system.
And the most important part of this donut shape is the hole itself.
The hole, yes, but specifically the very center point of that hole. The sources call it point G.
Point G.
This is the singularity point. According to the Bendall notes, at this point G, time is at 0. Entropy is 0.
Wait, hold on. 0 time.
Yeah.
0 entropy. That sounds exactly like a black hole.
It's very similar to the mechanics of a black hole, but on a manageable local scale. It's the eye of the storm. It's the absolute stillness around which all the violent movement happens.
Right.
The sources argue that in a properly functioning torus, like an atom or a star or a healthy living cell, energy flows in these spiral patterns to maintain that perfect center stillness.
And the notes mention specific lines for this flow, right? Fibonacci curves and straight lines.
Right. Think of a globe. You have lines of longitude, the ones that curve from the North Pole down to the South Pole.
Yeah.
In the torus model, those longitudinal lines are the spirals. That's the energy actively flowing in. Then you have the lines of latitude, the straight rings around the equator. That's the physical structure holding it.
So you really need both to make it work.
You need both, but the interaction between them is what matters. The spiral flow creates a torque. It compresses charge towards that center point.
Implosion.
Exactly. It's an implosion engine. It concentrates energy rather than dissipating it like an explosion would.
So if you build a building that mimics this shape, or at least mimics the energetic flow of this shape, you are essentially creating a generator.
You are creating a physical structure that accumulates life force. This connects directly to the work of Rudolf Steiner, which is also referenced heavily in our stack.
I've heard of Steiner schools, obviously. I had no idea he was designing physics engines.
He was a philosopher and esotericist in the early 20th century, sure. But his view on physics matches this torus model perfectly. He talked about something called formative forces.
Formative forces.
Yes. His argument was that the Newtonian model of physics, the one we all learn, is only half the story.
How so?
Newton gave us the physical forces that push outward from the center, like magnetic pressure or an explosion. Steiner said there are also etheric forces that press inward from the periphery.
Pressing in from the periphery, like the universe is hugging you.
That's a really nice way to put it. Imagine being deep underwater. The water pressure is coming from everywhere, pushing in on you from all sides.
What?
Steiner believed that the cosmos exerts a similar kind of pressure, a life pressure, that physically holds forms together.
And our modern buildings block this pressure.
Completely. If you build a square box with thick concrete walls and steel grids, You are essentially building a rigid dam against these inward-pressing etheric forces.
Wow.
You are isolating the inside of the building from the cosmic pressure that literally creates life.
So you're living in a dead zone. You're cutting yourself off from the battery charger of the universe.
Precisely. And this isn't just a fun theory. The sources claim we have actual historical examples of machines that were built correctly to harness this. But to find them, you have to look in some unexpected places.
This is where it gets really interesting. Because I'll be honest, when I saw the Bible in the source list for a hard physics discussion, I was skeptical.
Sure.
I thought, okay, are we doing theology or are we doing engineering? But the MS Art patent application notes treat this thing like a piece of high-tech hardware.
It's fascinating. They aren't looking at it as a religious symbol at all. They are strictly looking at the engineering specs. We are talking about the Molten Sea from 1 Kings chapter 7.
For those of you who haven't read 1 Kings lately, what exactly is the Molten Sea?
It was a massive bronze vessel that stood in the courtyard of Solomon's temple. It was supposedly used for ceremonial washing.
A big bathtub.
Right. But when you look at the dimensions and the specific materials, it looks a lot less like a bathtub and a lot more like a reactor.
Let's look at the dimensions. I have the text here. It says it was 10 cubits from the one brim to the other,
Across.
5 cubits the height thereof, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. It's a circumference of 30.
Right. And for centuries, mainstream mathematicians have looked at that verse and said, well, the Bible is just wrong.
Why? Because of pi.
Because of pi. If the diameter is 10 cubits, the circumference should mathematically be 31.4159 cubits, pi times diameter.
Right.
But the text very clearly says the circumference is exactly 30.
So people just assume they rounded down because the ancient world wasn't great at decimals.
That's what most scholars say. Oh, they just approximated to keep it simple. But the sources we're analyzing say, no, the Bible isn't bad at math. It is describing a very specific non-circular geometry.
Meaning the brim wasn't a perfect circle.
Exactly. If you have a circumference of 30 and a diameter of 10, you aren't describing a simple cylinder. You are describing a hexagon, or more specifically in this context, a complex curve based on a 16-sector torus.
16 sectors. That number 16 keeps coming up over and over in these documents.
It's crucial. The vessel physically acts as a 16-sector torus. The phrase line of 30 cubits refers to the internal harmonic geometry of the shape.
Oh, yeah.
It's actively tuning the shape to a specific resonant frequency. And it wasn't just made of any random metal, it was specifically bronze.
Which is an alloy. Copper and tin.
The notes are very specific. It's a precise alloy of 60% copper and 40% tin.
Why does that matter?
This composition is incredibly important for the electromagnetic properties of the vessel. Copper is a fantastic conductor. Tin adds structural integrity so it can hold the water, but it also adds a specific resonance.
Okay.
And this specific shape, combined with this specific bronze alloy, creates a very distinct magnetic setup that the notes call config D.
Config D, so it's an actual magnetic configuration.
Yes. The material and the geometry work together to lock it into config D, which allows it to process energy. But the real mind blower, and I need you to stay with me here because this is where the math gets genuinely wild, is the conversion ratio.
The 11.111 number.
Yes. The sources introduce this number, 11.111.
Okay, let's unpack this slowly. Why is 11.111 so vitally important to this machine?
According to the Bendall notes, 11.111 is the mathematical conversion factor from aether to matter.
Aether to matter. That is a massive claim.
Think of aether as the invisible background energy of the universe, the zero-point field. We can call it direct current or DC.
Okay, acre is DC.
And think of matter, the manifest physical world we can touch, as alternating current or AC. The source claims that to geometrically get from the DC background field to the AC physical world, you divide by 11.111.
Can you prove that? Or at least give me an example of how that works in reality.
Okay, let's do the math right now. Let's look at the moon.
The moon, okay.
Do you know the exact diameter of the moon in miles?
I do not have that memorized, no.
It's 2,160 miles. Now, I should mention this relies on the imperial mile being a sacred geodetic unit, which is a whole other rabbit hole we don't have time for today, but stick with the numbers.
160.
Okay, so 2,160.
Now, divide that by this aether conversion number, 11.111. What do you get?
Okay, let me do the mental math. 2160 divided by 11, it's roughly 194.
It's exactly 194.4.
194.4. Okay, does that number mean anything?
In the plasmoid unification model, 194.4 is a fundamental frequency node. It mathematically connects directly to the speed of light.
Wait, how? If you look at the speed of light measured in nautical miles per second, and you apply harmonic scaling look, Without getting too bogged down in the deep formulas, 194.4 is considered a light harmonic.
Okay.
The overarching argument is that the physical size of the moon isn't just some random cosmic accident. It's a crystallized vibration. It is the invisible aether converted into physical matter through this specific geometric ratio of 11.111.
Are you seriously telling me the actual physical size of the moon in miles is mathematically locked to the speed of light via this conversion factor?
That is exactly the claim. And furthermore, that the Molten Sea was built using these exact same cosmic ratios. It wasn't just a big bowl for washing hands. It was a calculator, a resonance chamber.
And it held water. The text says it held 2,000 baths.
Right. A bath is an ancient unit of liquid measure, but the sources claim this specification isn't just about water storage capacity, it's a harmonic calculation.
How so?
The number 2000 connects specifically to the healing frequency of water.
A healing frequency.
Later in the notes, we see a direct connection drawn between the number 2000 and the sound frequency of 432 hertz.
Okay.
The argument is that this massive vessel holding this specific volume of water in this specific 16-sector shape made of this specific bronze alloy in config D acted as a literal aether-to-matter converter.
So practically speaking, if I'm standing in the courtyard 3,000 years ago, what does a machine actually do? You put water in it.
You put the water in and you spin it. You physically create a vortex, an implosion.
Like the bathtub drain we talked about earlier.
Exactly like that. By rotating the water in a specific vortex within this highly tuned geometry, you create a region of low charge density right in the center of the bowl.
A G point again, the 0 point.
Yes, you create a literal vacuum in the ether field, and nature abhors a vacuum. So background energy rushes into that center point.
Okay.
But because of the geometry of the bowl, those 16 sectors acting as a guide, that rushing energy becomes structured. It allows matter to actually manifest from the background energy field. It revitalizes the water. It basically turns the water itself into a liquid battery charged with negentropy.
This sounds straight up like alchemy. But they are describing it with extremely precise engineering specs.
That's the true synthesis we are talking about here. In the ancient world, there was absolutely no difference between temple building and particle physics. It was all one unified science of resonance.
Yeah.
They didn't have massive underground cyclotrons like CERN. They used the architecture itself to bend the physics.
Okay, so we have these incredible ancient blueprints that claim to be literal machines. But at the end of the day, that's just text.
Right.
How do we know any of this actually does anything in the real world? You can't exactly travel back in time to Solomon's temple and test the water.
We can't go back, no, but we can measure the active effects of those geometric shapes today. And that's exactly where Dr. Ibrahim Karim and the science of biogeometry come in.
This is the bridge, right?
Yes. Because if the Molten Sea was using shape to process quantum energy, biogeometry seems to be the modern manual on exactly how to do that. He stopped just reading the old texts and started measuring the actual physics.
Dr. Karim is an architect and a scientist, right?
He is. He went to the ancient Egyptian temples, he went to the massive Gothic French cathedrals, and he actually used scientific sensors to measure the ambient energy fields inside them, and he found a very specific, repeatable energy quality.
The sources say he calls it BG3.
EG3. It stands for the Biogeometry 3. It's a highly harmonizing, centering energy quality that is consistently found in these sacred spots. It's the energy of the center point we've been talking about.
The 0 point.
Right. And guess what specific number generates this BG3 energy?
Let me guess. Given the last segment, it's got to be 16.
The number 16. Just like the 16 sectors of the Molten Sea. Karim found that if you simply have a physical form with 16 identical elements, like, say, 16 flat disks stacked on top of each other.
16 disks.
Yes, stacking 16 disks physically generates this BG3 quality in the space around it.
So the Molten Sea was basically just a giant, finely tuned BG3 generator.
A massive one, a broadcaster. But it wasn't just the objects themselves that mattered, it was the placement. Biogeometry talks extensively about grid technology.
This is about where you physically put the building on the Earth.
Yeah.
Right? Like siting the foundation.
Right. The Earth has its own invisible electromagnetic energy lines. You might have heard people talk about ley lines.
Yeah, ley lines.
But in biogeometry, they get much more specific. They talk about Hartmann lines, Curry lines, and these larger intersections they call sacred power spots.
Okay.
The ancient architects didn't just plop a massive temple down wherever there was a nice view or a flat piece of land. They rigorously surveyed the invisible energy grid first.
The sources mentioned they used major Earth energy lines running BG3 as the central axis for the site.
Correct. The main hallway or axis of the temple had to perfectly align with the natural energy flow of the Earth. But here is the architectural secret that really blew my mind when reading this. It's about the walls. They placed the massive stone walls directly on top of the grid lines.
Wait, why put the solid wall right on the line? Wouldn't you want the energy line in the middle of the room so people can stand in it and absorb it?
You might think so instinctively, but you actually want the wall to act as a physical conductor.
Oh.
If the huge stone wall sits directly on the active energy line, the wall itself becomes charged with that earth energy. It conducts it up from the ground and into the physical material of the building.
So the stone block isn't just dead weight holding up the roof, it's a wire.
It's a waveguide. It distributes that BG3 energy around the entire perimeter of the structure. The building literally becomes a living building.
And how does modern construction compare to this?
We completely ignore it. We pour massive, flat concrete slabs that instantly block the Earth's natural energy from rising up.
Yeah.
We use dense steel grids in the walls that create literal Faraday cages, trapping us inside with our own artificial electromagnetic smog from our Wi-Fi and phones. We are physically disconnecting ourselves from the Earth's motherboard every time we go indoors.
That is incredibly bleak when you put it like that.
It is. But the sources also mention some really specific architectural techniques for generating this energy, even without the Earth lines. Transparency was one concept that caught my eye, but I found it a bit hard to visualize from the text.
Transparency, right?
Yeah.
In modern architecture, like with Mies van der Rohe or a Frank Lloyd Wright house, transparency usually just means using a lot of glass so you can see through a wall.
Yeah, big windows.
But in biogeometry, it means something totally different. It means erasing parts of a physical form while keeping the underlying geometry intact.
Can you give me a visual for that? Explain it like I'm 5.
Okay, let's try this. Imagine a stencil, a piece of flat cardboard with a star shape cut out of the middle of it.
Got it. Stencil.
If you take a can of spray paint and spray over it against a wall, you get a painted star on the wall. But think about the cardboard stencil itself.
Okay.
The cardboard has a hole in the exact shape of a star.
Yeah.
The physical material is completely missing there, but the shape is still undeniably there.
The void itself has a defined shape.
Exactly. Biogeometry reveals that the void, the empty space, actually holds the vibrational information of the shape just as much as a solid object would. You can have a virtual shape.
So if I have a solid wood window frame, but there's no glass in it.
The energetic quality of the rectangle is still entirely present in that empty space. You don't need a solid, heavy door to generate the specific energy of the door's proportions.
That is trippy.
Right. This allows master architects to create incredibly powerful energetics with very minimal physical mass just by using these virtual shapes. The empty space is literally doing the energetic heavy lifting.
The empty space is where the information is. That completely changes how you look at open floor plans.
It does. Another major technique mentioned is rotation and shifting. This is the secret physics behind all those incredibly complex, beautiful geometric patterns you see in mosques and traditional Islamic art.
The star patterns.
Right. If you take two basic squares and superimpose them on top of each other, but you rotate one by exactly 45 degrees, you get an 8-pointed star.
Sure, basic geometry.
But energetically, something profound happens right at the center point. By rotating the two shapes over a shared center, you mathematically create a virtual axis.
A virtual axis.
Yes, and this virtual axis acts like an open doorway to that harmonizing BG3 energy.
So all those intricate tile patterns aren't just pretty wallpaper meant to look nice.
No, they are active energy emitters. They are essentially tuning forks embedded in the walls. They are static, solid-state generators of centripetal force.
Wow.
They actively pull the ambient energy towards the center. That's exactly why you feel so peaceful and centered when you walk into those sacred spaces. The geometry on the walls is literally physically pulling your chaotic personal energy into a centered, coherent state.
It's just amazing to think that what we dismiss as decoration could be highly functional machinery.
In the ancient world, there was really no such thing as just decoration. Everything had a specific function, even down to the base materials.
Right. I noticed the sources really slam concrete and steel.
They do. Concrete and steel are considered high-density blocking materials. They don't ring energetically.
They're dead.
Exactly. The sources heavily emphasize using natural materials, stone, natural wood, and specific resonant metals. Bronze, again, is constantly highlighted.
Like the Molten Sea.
Yes. These natural materials are porous enough to allow for cosmic resonance. They can breathe, energetically speaking, whereas concrete just suffocates the space.
Okay, so we have the shape, we have the material, and we have the exact placement on the Earth grid, but there's another layer to this whole engine: sound.
Acoustic resonance.
This seems to be the glue that holds the entire physics model together in these texts. You really can't talk about geometry without talking about vibration.
The sources bring up the frequency stack,
Right?
and they immediately go straight for the throat of the modern standard tuning for music, which is 440 hertz.
This is a classic, huge debate in the audio world. 440 hertz has been the standard tuning for music since around the mid-20th century. But many people argue it was an arbitrary or even potentially malicious change away from the historical natural standard of 432 hertz.
And the sources we're looking at today definitely take the 432 side.
Oh, heavily. They describe 432 hertz as a true universal frequency. It relates perfectly mathematically to the rotation of the Earth, the speed of light, you remember, our 194.4 number.
Yeah, the moon math.
Exactly. It ties into all that, and it ties directly into the specific geometry of the Molten Sea.
And what do they say about 440 hertz?
They describe 440 hertz as a fundamentally discordant frequency, one that actively creates tension or subtle separation in the listener. It basically creates a constant, slight agitation in the biological human system.
And here is probably the weirdest part of the whole stack for me. The 2,000 bath capacity of the Molten Sea is actually described as a specific engineering solution to heal that discordant sound.
This is just wild to me. The big water bowl fixes the bad sound.
How does water fix sound?
Well, water is the coupling medium. If you expose water to 440 hertz sound waves, the crystalline structure of the water, according to these theories, becomes physically chaotic.
Okay.
If you look at it under a microscope, it looks messy and asymmetric. But if you expose that same water to 422 hertz, it instantly forms these beautiful, perfectly hexagonal, life-affirming geometric patterns.
The perfectly formed snowflakes.
Exactly. The Molten Sea, simply by its physical dimensions and its exact volume, those 2,000 baths, was permanently tuned to resonate at 432 hertz.
Wow.
It was essentially designed to naturally convert ambient discordant frequencies back into harmonic ones.
It was literally a giant auto-tune for the universe.
In a way, yes, it was constantly scrubbing the energetic noise out of the local aether field.
That's incredible.
But it goes way deeper than just fixing music. The sources mention a very specific velocity constant that appears to be a hard limit in the universe, 10,000 meters per second.
Yes, I knew that too. The Plasma Master research papers mention this exact number over and over again, the velocity of 10,000 meters per second. Why is this specific speed so special?
It appears to be a fundamental threshold in physics. It's defined as the characteristic velocity for explosive charge separation.
Okay, lay language, please. Break that down.
When you violently rip electrons away from their atoms, like in a spark plug or a lightning bolt or an explosion, the material gets rapidly ejected.
Right.
In these exotic vacuum objects, EVOs, and in shaped-charged copper jets, which the military uses in anti-tank weapons to punch through heavy armor, the plasma shoots out at exactly 10,000 meters per second.
That is weirdly specific. Not 9,000, not 11,000.
It is remarkably consistently specific.
Yeah.
It suggests there's a fundamental speed limit or a literal gear shift in the underlying physics of matter.
Okay.
It's kind of like the speed of sound, but for high-energy plasma. It's the bridge that connects the mechanical world to the electromagnetic world. It even dictates how sound propagates in ultra-dense materials like certain ceramics and diamonds.
And there was a physical experiment mentioned in the texts, the singing bowl experiment. I feel like this helps visualize what we're talking about.
Yes, this experiment is fantastic because it really brings it all together in one place: sound, plasma, and geometry.
Yeah.
The source describes using a standard, off-the-shelf plasma globe.
You mean those glass balls from Spencer's Gifts in the 90s with the little purple lightning bolts inside that follow your finger when you touch the glass?
Exactly those. They are just glass spheres filled with noble gases at low pressure.
Right.
So, in this experiment, you take one of those plasma globes and you wrap a physical copper coil around the outside of it. Then you hook that copper coil directly up to a function generator, which is just a device that outputs very specific pure sound frequencies as electrical signals.
Okay, so we are vibrating the gas plasma inside the globe using electricity and targeted sound.
Right. They pumped in a very specific mix of frequencies through the coil, specifically 7.83 hertz.
The Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth.
Correct. And they mixed that Earth frequency perfectly with 432 hertz.
The harmonic water frequency.
Right. And the result, the chaotic purple plasma streams inside the globe completely stopped looking like random fuzzy lightning.
What did they do?
They self-organized. They literally formed distinct, stable, golden ratio spirals inside the glass.
No way. Just from the sound.
The sound frequency physically shaped the chaotic matter of the plasma into perfect sacred geometry.
That is incredible. So the geometry we see carved into temple walls isn't just a drawing. It's the actual shape that raw energy desperately wants to take when it's harmonized.
It's the literal shape of perfect flow. And here is the kicker from that paper. The source explicitly says that the plasma streams responded to consciousness.
Meaning what exactly? Like if you just stared at the globe.
Meaning, when the human observer in the room actively focused their mental intention on the plasma, the physical spirals inside the globe changed shape.
You're kidding.
This proves, at least to the incredibly credentialed authors of these papers, that sound and frequency shape physical matter, and that human consciousness is the active driver of the system.
This transitions us perfectly into the actual forbidden physics section of the outline.
Yeah.
Because we are talking about plasma now, and we have to talk about Ken Shoulders and his EVOs.
Ken Shoulders. He is an absolute legend in the fringe physics community. He was a highly respected experimentalist, really one of the fathers of modern microelectronics.
Okay.
But he went down this rabbit hole and discovered these microscopic anomalies he called exotic vacuum objects, or EVOs.
The notes are very careful to emphasize that these are not ball lightning in the traditional folklore sense.
Right. They aren't just spooky, fuzzy balls of light floating around in a swamp. They are incredibly dense, microscale-shaped charges.
Okay.
Imagine a tiny donut made entirely of electrons. Billions of electrons clumped together so impossibly tightly that, according to standard model physics, they absolutely shouldn't exist.
Why shouldn't they exist?
Because electrons all have a negative charge, and like charges strongly repel each other.
Right, magnets pushing apart.
Exactly. If you somehow force a billion electrons into a tiny microscopic pile, they should fly apart instantly with massive explosive force.
But in an EVO?
They don't fly apart. They actually form a hypercoherent structure, a torus.
The donut again?
The donut. They naturally implode into a highly stable state, and because they're so dense, they contain immense, staggering amounts of energy. Shoulders found in his lab that these microscopic things could penetrate solid matter.
Like a bullet shooting through a wall.
Like a bunker buster, the notes say, but on a nanoscale.
Wow.
They penetrate matter via something called plastic deformation. They don't burn a hole through the metal with heat. They just cleanly shove the atoms of the solid material out of the way as they pass through. They act like incredibly heavy, solid objects.
And how on earth does this highly destructive nanobullet connect back to biogeometry in ancient temples?
This is the massive aha moment in the sources. The bold claim is that biogeometry is literally the programming language for these EVOs.
Programming language. How do you program a clump of electrons?
If EVOs are basically just blank little packets of intense potential energy, the ambient biogeometry field tells them what to do.
Oh,
The sacred geometry shapes, the specific physical patterns we see carved into the temples, generate an invisible field that actually organizes these EVOs. Instead of being chaotic, destructive little bunker busters tearing through atoms, they become beneficial.
they change their behavior based on the shape of the room.
Yes, they become healing charges working at the quantum level to repair biological cells.
So a massive stone temple is basically just a giant passive microchip designed to process these quantum energy packets.
Exactly. And the Earth energy grid we talked about earlier, that is the physical circuit board plugging it all in.
This brings us to the implosive turbine. This is the practical machine part of the outline that I really wanted to get to today. The Bendall implosive turbine engine.
This is where the rubber finally meets the road for modern application. Malcolm Bendall isn't just sitting around theorizing about ancient bronze bowls. He's designing an actual physical engine you can build,
The patent notes call it a thunderstorm harvester.
which is honestly the coolest name for an engine I have ever heard, thunderstorm harvester.
It sounds like a super weapon.
It really describes the function perfectly, though. Think about a massive thunderstorm. It's a huge, violent exchange of planetary energy. Heat, moisture, lightning, pressure.
Yeah.
Bendall's turbine works on the core principle that our current internal combustion engines are just incredibly, laughably wasteful.
How wasteful are we talking?
A standard modern combustion engine in your car uses maybe 30% of the actual energy stored in the gasoline.
Wait, really? Just 30%?
The rest, the other roughly 70%, is completely lost as waste heat and toxic exhaust. We are mostly just driving around heating up the ambient air.
That is depressing.
Bendall's turbine is specifically designed to completely capture that wasted 70%.
How does it mechanically do that?
By using the geometry to create a self-sustaining vortex. He calls it the butterfly effect.
Okay.
It creates a physical condition inside the engine where the hot exhaust isn't just dumped out a tailpipe. It is grabbed, spun into a tight vortex, actively imploded, and reburned. It recycles its own waste energy.
And the specific physical geometry of the turbine blades is key here, right?
Yeah.
I saw some crazy diagrams in the patent notes with different colored blades.
Yes. It's what he calls the yin and yang geometry. The actual engine design features blue clockwise spinning blades and red anti-clockwise spinning blades.
Blue and red. I assume that's not just for aesthetics.
It's definitely not just for looks. The colors represent the forces. Blue represents the negative implosive centripetal force, the cooling suction force.
Okay.
Red represents the positive explosive centrifugal force.
So the engine is physically balancing the two universal forces inside a metal casing.
It is a literal mechanical model of the universe. It actively balances expansion and contraction to create a stable zero-point energy condition inside the chamber.
Just like the Torus.
Exactly. It's essentially trying to mimic the ancient Molten Sea, but in a modern spinning turbine format. If you put your hand near the air intake of a normal car engine, it's hot, right?
Right, it's sucking in air to burn.
The claim is that if you put your hand near the intake of an active implosive turbine, you actually feel cold.
Cold? Why?
Because it's actively concentrating energy through suction, it's not dissipating energy through an explosion, it creates a localized cooling effect.
Okay, so if this technology exists on paper, or at least the detailed blueprints exist in these patents, why aren't we all driving implosion cars right now? Why isn't my suburban house a giant BG3 generator?
That is the big multi-trillion-dollar question. I mean, you could easily say it's suppressed by the big oil companies or the massive construction lobby.
Sure, follow the money.
And sure, they absolutely love the highly profitable status quo. But the sources we're reading offer a much more profound physics-based answer for why this isn't everywhere.
Okay.
The critical missing variable in all of our modern science is consciousness.
Here's where it gets really tricky. And maybe a little frustrating for the hard-nosed engineers listening out there.
It is extremely frustrating because as a modern society, we desperately want a machine that works the exact same way every single time, completely regardless of who pushes the power button.
We want an iPhone.
Right. But the sources argue that this is fundamentally not push-button technology. You can't just build the exact 16-sector shape out of bronze and walk away expecting free energy. The observer effect is highly real and necessary.
This directly goes back to the singing bowl plasma experiment you mentioned earlier.
Yes. In the plasma experiments, and theoretically in the historical operation of the Molten Sea, the human operator's personal intention actually matters to the physics.
So the machine reads your mood.
Kind of. If you, as the operator, are angry or internally chaotic or energetically disconnected, the required torus field just doesn't form. The vacuum isn't created.
So if I'm having a really stressful day at work and I try to run the singing bowl experiment in my garage,
You might just get chaotic, random purple lightning. The machine fails. But if you are deeply centered and resonant, you get the perfect golden ratio spiral.
that is wild.
The architecture of the ancient temples wasn't just a dead standalone machine. It was explicitly designed as a consciousness amplification device.
Like a musical instrument.
That is the perfect analogy. Think of a priceless Stradivarius violin. It is an absolute masterpiece of geometry and material science, perfect aging of the wood, perfect harmonic curves.
Right.
But if you hand that masterpiece to a 3-year-old toddler,
It just makes terrible noise.
it screeches, it sounds awful. But if you hand that exact same physical object to a master musician, it makes pure magic.
Wow.
The temple architecture focuses the ambient electromagnetic fields, yes, but the human awareness must actively interact with those fields to actually turn on the machine. You are the key.
This totally connects back to the water aspect we talked about. The notes explicitly say water is the coupling medium.
Water physically carries the information. It holds the frequencies, specifically that 432 hertz vibration.
Okay.
It mathematically connects the biological consciousness of the person standing there to the massive electromagnetic field of the stone building.
So that's why they were washing in it.
This is exactly why every single ancient temple across the globe had ablution pools or holy water fonts at the entrance, or the massive molten sea in the courtyard. You had to physically interact with the tuned water to electrochemically couple your body to the structure's grid.
The level of detail they went into is insane.
Yeah.
Even the furniture inside the spaces. There's a specific mention of a sacred seat design in the biogeometry notes.
Yes, even the literal chair you sit in matters to the physics of the room.
Yep.
The sacred seat design involves a very specific base shaped like a dodecahedron.
A 12-sided shape.
Right, and a backrest pitched at an angle of exactly 72 degrees.
Why exactly 72?
72 is a very important pentagonal number. It mathematically relates to the five-sided symmetry of living organic things.
Give me an example.
Look at your own hand. 5 fingers. Look at a starfish. Look at the cross-section of DNA. The sources claim this isn't just a comfortable ergonomic chair for reading. It's an active quantum coherence enhancement device for the home.
Just sitting in a chair.
Literally just sitting in it passively aligns your personal biological geometric field with the Earth grid.
So we have come completely full circle today. We started out with the idea that our modern straight-line skyscrapers are actively fighting the laws of nature.
Right.
And we have ended up discussing 72-degree chairs that actively align our quantum coherence.
It's a completely wild ride, but when you finally step back and synthesize all these disparate sources, the big picture is incredibly consistent.
It really is.
We are looking at hard evidence of a lost technology where architecture, high math, quantum physics, and human consciousness were all just one single unified science.
It's literally the unified field theory that Einstein spent his whole life looking for on chalkboards, but it was physically hiding this whole time in a giant bronze bowl in a Gothic cathedral wall.
It strongly suggests that what we call forbidden physics isn't magic or woo-woo at all. It's just a completely different branch of science.
Right.
One that fundamentally prioritizes implosion in life over explosion in death. It fully acknowledges that the physical shape of our world entirely dictates the energy of our world.
And that is exactly the takeaway for you listening at home right now. I want you to look around your room one more time. Look at the square corners. Look at the flat materials.
The box.
We are living our entire lives in boxes, designed by a culture obsessed with explosion and decay. But the actual blueprints for the living alternative are just sitting right there, heavily documented in these forbidden files.
And the sources clearly mention that every single ancient culture on Earth knew these principles. We're only just now barely rediscovering them in weird patents and dense fringe physics papers.
So here's a final provocative thought to keep you up tonight. If a simple carved geometric shape or specific water frequency can truly unlock unlimited energy or actual physical healing.
What does that say about the rectangular steel and concrete boxes we force ourselves to live in today?
Exactly. Are we just sleepwalking, living inside dead machines when we could be living inside actual life-giving generators?
And the really scary question, if we finally changed our architecture back to these principles, would we fundamentally change human consciousness?
That is the Deep Dives. Thanks for joining us down the rabbit hole into the geometry of the forbidden. We will see you on the next one.
Stay resonant.